This episode of The Modern People Leader is brought to you by metaview, the AI assistant for interviewing. Metaview captures and summarizes every nugget of gold from interviews so that your recruiters can leave note taking behind and focus on what matters most, building authentic relationships with candidates and helping hiring managers find that perfect fit for your organization. Unlike humans, metaview never gets tired, doesn't forget anything, and structures the notes perfectly for you to review and make decisions based on. Join recruiting leaders at companies like Brex, Robinhood, and Quora, and try MetaView for free. Just head over to metaview.ai/MPL to get started. That's metaview.ai/MPL. Adam, welcome to the Modern People Leader. It's good to see you again. How you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me, guys.
I guess it's been 2 months. We saw you at Transform, and I'm glad that. So shout out to Shelby Wolpa. I'm glad that she introduced us at Top Golf. It's always nice meeting our guests in person before we actually ever record. And one of the things that we learned about you immediately is that you're a fellow Texas alum. Is that right?
Somewhat true. Yeah, so
Okay,
I lived in Austin for 5 years. I
that's what it
worked
was.
at the University of Texas, and I feel like it was even in the same like narrow program that you were in, Stephen. Is that right?
No, no, it was the program that my two brothers were in. It's all coming back.
Right.
You worked with the business honors program, right?
That's
Yes.
right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hook 'em horns. Even though you didn't go to Texas, I feel like you still have some level of association, maybe some
I
pride
do
there.
have some level of association. And it was like in that first like .com boom. I had been working like in a startup in Austin, and everything went south really quick. If you were in Austin in like 2000, 2001, 2002, like really quick. And I like the only employer hiring in Austin I felt like was like the University of Texas at the time. So luckily they took me in, and I
Yeah.
spent some great years there. It was fun.
Well, you were in Austin before it was cool. I feel like now everybody's moving here, so you were ahead of
It
your
was
time.
it was yeah. There weren't toll roads. There was there was a you know there was no 620. There
Yeah.
was like so it was late '90s, early thousands. Yeah, it was fun.
That's cool. Well, let's do good news stories. So every episode we kick it off the same way, and that's what good news stories could be. Anything from the past week or two that's given you joy or something that you're proud of. And Adam, how about you kick us off?
Okay, and I think I can go personal, right? I'm gonna go
Yeah.
personal if that's okay. Well, here in California, it's where I'm based. It's the first week of summer, like kids are out of school, so it's like day three of summer, and I have three kids. But my oldest is now 16 and she can drive. And so like my
Ooh.
moment of joy is, well, there's terror there, but there's also like a level of convenience when you have like your first kid can drive, because she can drive her other two sisters around to camps and stuff like that. And
Yep.
so it's like a good start to summer because I'm doing a little bit less shuttling between camps and trying to keep my kids entertained. And my oldest can now play some of that role. So it's kind of fun.
I still remember those days. When I first got my license, my little brother, I think, was 11. And one of the responsibilities that my parents gave me was that I was supposed to pick up my little brother from school and drive him to school. And I don't know, there was like, obviously my parents were using me because it was convenient, but also like as a kid, there was something fun about like having the responsibility of driving my little brother to school and dropping him off and picking him up. So I'm
Yeah.
yeah, having flashbacks. Steven, do you
Well,
have
speaking of flashbacks of that, like I don't want to take us too far down the path, but my brother used to have to drive me to school, older brother, and he would make me ride in the trunk of the
what?
car because he didn't want to like like he didn't want me to sing with his friends in the car. He didn't want to be embarrassed by dropping me off at junior high or whatever. So he would like pull up in front of the school. We were in separate schools, like pop the hood or pop the trunk. I would like crawl out of the trunk and like walk into school. But like that was way better than taking the school bus. I'm like, that's fine. I'll
This
do
was a
that.
daily thing?
A daily thing, yeah.
Wow. That's funny.
It's
Steven,
funny.
unit go next, or you want me to take it?
No, 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 no. I definitely can go next. My good news is I typically so summer schedules are just for parents are just kind of wacky. Everything is, you go from your rigorous schedule to like free for all. And if you're lucky to get in the camps, and like there's additional coordinations, and that same holds true for our co-parenting schedules. So like normally I have my daughters every Thursday, every other weekend, but in the summers I don't. And so it can be at least the month of June can be a little bit lonely. Like I miss them a lot because I'm not seeing them as much as I usually do. But my good news is this weekend is Father's Day weekend. So I get an unusual weekend with my daughters right after I just had them this past weekend. And so I'm looking forward to having my daughters doing the things that I want to do, and hopefully them not complaining too much about that. Cause anything I like right now, they're 13 and 11, is like
Yeah.
so not cool. It's so
Mhm.
awkward. And so it'll be nice forcing them to do some of the things I like this weekend.
Uh, I love that for you. That's great.
And happy early Father's Day to the both of y'all. And thanks for the
Yeah,
reminder.
thanks.
I totally forgot that it was Father's Day on Sunday. So I need to do something
Yeah.
for my dad, for Big Al. All right. So my good news, I'm going personal as well. I got to see my nephew William yesterday, and it was the first time that I had seen him since I think Thanksgiving. And he's a little over 2 years old. So he looks totally different than he looked 6 months ago. He's running around now. He's talking a little bit. And he was really happy to see me, which was a surprise because I didn't know if he was going to remember me. But turns out he thinks that I'm my little brother, Mateo, who he sees on a weekly basis. So he kept like coming up to me and grabbing my hand and going, Teo, Teo. And it's like, no, Uncle Daniel, Uncle D. We tried to simplify it for him. And then my wife
Yeah.
came in way later and he immediately goes, Tari. And I was like, what? How does he know who she is? But he doesn't know who I am. But yeah,
Mm.
it was good seeing my little nephew.
At least you know where you fall in the pecking order of things.
Exactly.
It's good to lay that out early.
Yeah, I
That's what I
agree.
was saying. It's going to know that up front, how what that's going to be like. Cause I doubt that well, maybe it will change. You never know, but Tori's an amazing person. So you
She
can't
is.
fault him for that.
Yeah, I agree. So Adam, you've had quite the career in talent acquisition, from Facebook to Qualcomm to Pinterest. You've worked for some amazing brands, and now you're the founding partner of Growth by Design Talent. So take us through some of that journey. Like, walk us through what that career journey has looked like. Some of the, I guess, highlights and pit stops that you made along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. I'll try to be concise and let me know if you want to dive deeper on anything. Yeah, but I think like of my generation, none of us like went into our careers thinking, or in university or anything, think that we wanted to get into recruiting. Everyone like falls into recruiting, and I think I was just like fortunate enough to fall into it earlier than most. And it really came down to a really pivotal decision: is like, do I go back to my hometown and work in the dry cleaners, or do I take like this random internship in Austin where my aunt was working? And it was a no brainer. But I think I chose the right path, and that kind of, it turned out to be an internship in university recruiting at this like amazing startup in Austin that really, I think, had cornered the market on how to be like aggressive with and really aggressive with talent in recruiting. That kind of set me on a path. And so doing those startups and being through 3 downturns, it's been really quite interesting. And part of that was getting the opportunity to go to India for a year and build out a recruiting function and recruiting team. And you don't know at the time, but decisions you make like end up leading to the next and leading to the next. So getting that international exposure, doing that in India in like 2003, pretty early on relative to international recruiting and things like that, led to this global role at Qualcomm. And then this global role Qualcomm led to like a startup Facebook to go there and kind of build out their university recruiting program. So I mean, early career was around these long-term strategic programs around university and intern recruiting, when it wasn't always a strategic thing. Interns used to be like the summer friends and family program. Oh, my neighbor's son needs a job. We have a company, but pretty early on, both Trilogy, Qualcomm, and Facebook saw this as a really differentiated talent approach to building companies, which is building the relationships with the best students at the best global universities and seeding your company with those. And so that kind of really started my career, and that led to Pinterest and other things. but kind of learning really early on the power of building a brand, building a differentiator, building strategic pipelines in university recruiting, which is often, I think, is seen as like a junior role in a lot of companies, but these companies really value that in a more strategic way. And that kind of led me on this leadership path. And I think there's a lot of corollaries between university recruiting and being like a head of TA in terms of this longer term thinking.
And then I guess give us the founding story. Like what made you decide I want to go out on my own and start my own company?
Yeah. So a couple of factors there with when I was running. I ran recruiting at Pinterest for 5 years. We were just going public as a company, so that was like a big milestone moment. I think it's a cause for like take stock of like what you want to do next. But I had seen this pattern shifting within companies, and I think it's played out over the last 5 years, which is companies were realizing that their biggest investment was in talent and people, and they but that investment in kind of that function wasn't being as represented in the leaders that were leading those functions. So other people around the table, if recruiting and talent and people are getting the seats at the table, they weren't showing up in the same way that everyone else was. So your marketing leader, your sales leader, your engineering leader were showing up as these data-driven, first principles, structured thinkers. And then here comes this newer entity that we've invested a lot of money in, and we're leading with heart overhead. We're sharing anecdotes. We're kind of scattered. We don't have metrics, and we saw this big gap in the market essentially, where companies were shifting to wanting this more business-driven leader, but we collectively in tech and talent weren't developing them in a way. There wasn't a support system for recruiting and TA leaders out there. And so we saw this big gap in the market, and we're like, let's go after that, and let's go try to be that. We wanted to be the clearinghouse for all great recruiting talent in the industry, and like, let's build the things we wish we would have had when we were running recruiting at companies like Pinterest or Airbnb or other companies. We wish we would have had the support system to help us be successful and make less mistakes when we were running the function.
And you sort of, answered my next question a little bit, which is tell us how y'all are a bit different than other TA firms. It sounds like you help with the things that you wished you would have had help with. Give us like a couple of examples of what those types of things are.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that probably makes you unique is we do a breadth of things. So we do some search for people and talent leaders, but very focused. We do advisory work, we do training, and we have a software product. So we have this wide range of things. We've often found when we are in-house having subpar experiences with training firms or consulting firms or search firms because they didn't feel like they knew what was happening in the building. Felt like our incentives were misaligned a little bit. And so the work we do helps us, I think, stay in as many buildings as possible, even though we might be more distributed or remote than we were 5 years ago. But it helps us be really, I think, relate to the set of challenges they're going through. So things that we do that we wish we had is, we do this interview and hiring manager training. First of all, they're separate trainings. We're big believers like in effective hiring managers, but we do it in a very tailored, bespoke way to the company. So rather than an outside firm coming in with their deck or being recorded or someone watches it on their LMS on demand and like check the box, we do these live trainings that are much more workshops. And we think recruiting or interviewing or being an effective hiring manager is a skill. It takes practice. And so we're very hands-on and very kind of tailored to approaches. Or another example is like our software product is a recruiting capacity modeling tool. So it's a gap in the tech stack for HR, which is a tool that allows recruiting and people leaders to work with finance and business leaders to work on a same set of assumptions in terms of capacity, ratios, headcount plans, attrition scenarios. So you're all aligned on what headcount do we need when, and how much resourcing is it going to take to do it. And so these are things that, I had this like very intricate spreadsheet when I was running recruiting at Pinterest or running tech recruiting in university recruiting at Facebook, and inevitably it would break. And inevitably finance is running their own set of books too. And so it happens at the end of a quarter or a half. It's like, we think we're on track or on progress path. And finance is like reporting to the board that we're off. Like that's embarrassing. And so getting everyone on the same platform and the same set of assumptions is really powerful.
And when did the software product come along?
About a year and a half ago. So we had built like a really, really good Google Sheet that we trained teams on. And we basically end up not unknowingly kind of building the scaffolding for this software product. And then we started just like, hey, let's just build this. And we tried to get some of the vendors you probably know to go build it or put it into their roadmaps. And it just wasn't a priority for them. So we decided to go build it ourselves.
That's awesome. And why should me and Steven be jealous that you get to work there?
Um, I think one is you can work from anywhere. So we have a fully distributed team from the beginning, and that was even in early 2019. So we started pretty early on that. We have an amazing team. So most of our team are former recruiting or people leaders who wanted to have bigger impact by helping a broader set of companies. So we get these really talented folks, and so I feel like we have high quality folks, and with that, we get to work with high quality companies and really kind of vet them in a way that is aligned with our values, which is we believe that you can hold in constant speed of hiring with quality, diversity, and culture. Most companies unknowingly or unconsciously sacrifice one or more of those in the name of growth. But we feel like with the right investments, you can hold those things in constant. So we work with companies who also believe that. And when you kind of connect that together, we can make some great things happen for our companies.
Love what you guys are doing. And there's honestly so much that I want to cover today, Adam. Talent acquisition isn't really a topic we have spent a lot of time talking about, which is crazy because we are like 120 episodes deep. And I feel like there's been maybe one or two episodes where we've really zeroed in on this topic. And it's a really interesting time right now. Well, interesting is one word, confusing could be another
Yeah,
word. And
for sure.
and so I want to start out our conversation with you a little different. Normally, we would just jump into questions and get real deep into
Mhm.
very specific topics. And I want to zoom out just really quickly because I want to talk about like the state of the union for talent right now. Like, where
Mhm.
are we? Like, what is
Yeah.
going on? What is happening? And I think where I want to start is really there. If you follow the news, it's easy to be confused just around the economic status of state of where we're
Yeah.
at. Some companies are still recording record profits, but they're laying people off. And it's
Mhm.
like, what in the heck is actually happening? I feel like it's not only do we not have a clear sense of where we are from an economic perspective, but more specifically looking at the workforce, looking at the labor market, it's even more confusing. And
Yeah.
so, from your perspective, talking to the clients that you talk to, like where are we from your view
Mhm.
in the business cycle from a TA perspective? Are we
Yeah.
expanding,
And
contracting? What's the situation we're in?
I mean, I think it is very confusing because if you look at these macro indicators, like unemployment is the lowest it's been in decades. The stock market is at an 18-month high, I believe, as of yesterday. Yet, I think in tech, we're very insular, and it feels like the sky is falling in tech because of the cycles of tech and like the swings, the pendulum swings very wide in tech. So crazy out of control growth over the last 5 years, and now huge cuts, and so and then it ends up like nestling in the middle over time. But it's hard to know like how big that arc is sometimes. Like when we're in a high growth, we're like, how long can this go? Do you remember having this conversation? Like we can't go this long, and it kept going. And similar to like right now, the swing the other way. We don't know. We don't know how long it goes, but we do know like it nestles back in the middle. And tech ends up being the front edge of these things. So you remember when this run up starting in, I don't know, 2010, 2011, maybe, I don't know, pick the window, tech was not aligning to any other macroeconomic factors, just like right now it's not. And so it's important to remember that we are sometimes off cycle with like macroeconomic things. But all cycles come to an end, positive and negative, and this too will too come from an end. The net of it is that it's very choppy right now. And I think generally, if you think about like the tech sector, we're generally optimists. We're looking for reasons to believe. In a venture world, backed world, like give me the reason to believe. And so I think we sometimes have these false starts of like it's coming back, it's thawing out because I think we generally lean optimistic versus pessimistic on that way. But I think that also creates a little bit of that choppiness too. Like, okay, here we're going, we're coming out of it, and it's just going to be uneven. I think for a period of time here. I feel like we're at this like plateau generally right now, waiting for like the big uptick. But if you zoomed in on any given month, there's like little like stacking S curves of ups and downs, even with like a month window. And I think people feel that like thrash. The net of it is like there's still a lot of activity happening. That activity is not net new headcount happening, but there's like, attrition is up almost across the board at companies. Engagement is way down. And so people are switching seats a lot. And that's all recruiting activity, even if new roles aren't generally being created in aggregate across the industry. So lots of activity, lots of like unrest, if you will. And I think people like looking for a more consistent set of back-to-back weeks to believe that like this is turning around.
And so if you're a people leader right now, like what advice would you give them as they forecast for the next, couple quarters?
Yeah, I think one is like, let's be aware of like false precision of like more than a couple quarters and trying to crystal ball things. The second would be like, what are the factors that are unique to your business? What are the leading indicators for your business that might give you hope or not of kind of growth or downturn? Like pay attention to the unique things for your company. Try to avoid the fast following of, oh, this company's doing that, so we should be doing that, versus what matters to our company in terms of the leading indicators that might indicate a change in slope. And then I think the third is like it is a great time to work through a lot of the people or recruiting debt you've accrued over the last several years, where because there's been such a breakneck pace, possibly you haven't as much time to invest in infrastructure things, performance, quality of hire, talent density, whatever those things might be. This is a great time to be working through those and preparing yourself for the next swing. Because if we know anything about tech, if you're around for the next swing, it's going to be crazy. If you think you pull back the rubber band, the further you pull it back, the further it snaps forward. And we know like when it comes back with a vengeance. And you can be preparing yourself now for that next swing.
One of the things I learned at Goldman was having regardless of where you are in the market, there's always opportunity. And as further out that you get on those swings, there tends to be more opportunity. Not always, but sometimes. So
Yeah.
the mantra was always like, oh, economic growth, great. Oh, recession, great. Like either way, there's opportunity there. And so not necessarily from a hiring standpoint, almost more along the lines of the last point you just made. What are some of the key trends, some of the key investments that you're seeing companies make right now? Not necessarily in hiring, but things like tech stack, or maybe with certain hires you could level up. There's, for example, I know there are segments where there's just a lot of great talent out there, and so maybe you're leveling up in your marketing team. What are some of the things that you're seeing?
Yeah, I was just talking to a couple talent partners at venture firms yesterday and today, and they're seeing a lot of sales and marketing teams being like up leveled or kind of reevaluated. It makes a lot of sense. And so I think that's one thing you can think about is like, do I have the right go forward leadership team and strategy? And like that takes time to figure out, right? So it's a good time to like dive in and think about that from a go forward standpoint. I also see a lot of people leaders thinking about like the effectiveness of how their current leadership team is working together and communicating into the organization. And so in times of uncertainty, communication, clear, crisp, and concise communication is really important. And when they look across how their leaders are operating, it's very inconsistent in terms of how and what they're communicating to their teams, which leads to more uncertainty and more confusion within the organization. So that would be an example as well.
So one thing I heard you talk about in, I think, the Ashby podcast that just got released, you talked about different influencing styles and how depending on the person's influencing style, then maybe the way that you try to appeal to them is going to be a little bit different. So I'm just curious, what is your style?
Yeah, maybe I would love to hear. Can you guess what my style is from knowing me? Do you think? Do you think it's
I want to
Yeah,
say,
I'll give you the three. I can give you the three and define them, but but do you have a sense of there's cooperative, logical, and emotional?
I think it was, I would say logical,
That's what I
but
was gonna say.
I don't know you too well.
I love that. That's like my adjusted style. Like I think I've learned to be logical over time and very like structured data, but like that is not like my natural. Like
Interesting.
that's not my
Oh,
resting point. That's like my adjusted style over time. I'm much more like probably like a cooperative like relationship like led person, but I've had to adjust as like a leader too. And I find like more the people that I'm working with today and even past companies logical was like the approach I needed to take. So I feel like I've started to like change my style as a reflection to like the customer, if you will, or the person I was trying to influence.
And that makes sense because you later go on to say that you used to have like this insatiable need to be liked, and you
Mm-hmm.
had to get over that, and you had to realize that being liked doesn't always mean that you're respected, but
Mm-hmm.
being respected can lead to you being liked. And I'm guessing
Yeah.
this is a realization you had at a certain point in your career.
Yeah. I can tell you a quick story about that. And it was when I made the transition from Qualcomm, who at the time when I left was maybe 25,000 employees, joining a Facebook that was 1,500, moving from San Diego to Silicon Valley at that time. So crazy imposter syndrome, like out of, an outsider, as much of an outsider as you can be in Silicon Valley. And I remember like wanting to like win this team over, right? Wanting to rally this team behind like a big goal that we had. In January, we were way behind hiring goal. And I thought that if I like was a part of the team and got them excited and rallied and like much more in the cheerleader spectrum of stuff, that I would win their followership towards this aggressive goal. I made a t-shirt, we did this, and it turns out like what they really needed was like structure, feedback, tough method. They needed actually this other set of things, but I thought what I really just needed was like to curry their favor, like to get them aligned and get them like motivated. And I realized after the fact that if I got the team to be successful goals, they would like respect me more as a leader and also probably like me. But me just like hanging out with them or always diving into the trenches with them or trying to like be reactive to each person's needs. So if you know a manager who is like, hey, can I have this? You're like, yep. And it's like, hey, can I have that? And it's a little bit different and inconsistent to what you said. Just now, people don't know your leadership style. They can't anticipate decisions you might make because you're being reactive to a different person. And that was really confusing for me because I was trying to just get them to like me as a manager versus having a first principle of no, this is how we like make decisions on things. People will generally respect that over time, even if they don't agree with it. And so that was like a really valuable lesson. And I can't believe they didn't fire me when I first started at Facebook, but luckily they gave me like another chance. And like I learned that like getting the team's respect was a a precursor to also being liked as a person.
Yeah. I haven't had as much experience managing people, but I guess my experience as an individual contributor, the teams that I've been on that have been the most successful have a lot of structure. And I think back to my days working at Workify with Steven, where
Mm-hmm.
we all operated around what we called L10 meetings. So every week we would have like these very structured meetings where we're checking in on different areas of the business. We're looking at the data. We're debating like how we should move forward. We're putting together next steps. We're like rating ourselves. We have rituals that are baked in, and something about like having structure like that is so comforting as somebody
Mm-hmm.
that's on the team because you know what's expected of you. You know what like the weekly rhythms are gonna be like. You sort of like look forward to these meetings in a way because of the
Mm-hmm.
fun aspects of them, and it makes you respect your team leader because you're like, oh, this person like has their shit together and
Yeah.
they have a vision, even if they're just like even if the vision is sort of broad and they're like letting you fill in
Mm-hmm.
the blanks and do whatever you want with it. So I just wanted to plus one that. Go.
Well, let me one simple construct I think about like is like an employee's bill of rights, and it's really two parts. One part is like I know what's expected of me, and I know where I stand against those. That's really like if you can
Yeah.
do those two things as a leader, that'll get you 90% of the way. And by the way, structure is like really important, but there's also things you can personalize as a manager or as a leader. Which one is like, do I understand how my employee likes to be recognized? That can be very tailored and personalized. Steven might really enjoy getting pulled up in front of the team, the room, at an all hands and recognized, and that could be mortifying for you, Daniel. Right? Like that could actually be a net negative. Like you think you're doing something great, like I'm gonna bring Daniel up and like tell him what a great job. That could be like hugely embarrassing and mortifying, right?
I've been in that position, and
Yeah,
it happened. I still remember I was working at Udacity, and they would give out like these quarterly awards, and
yeah.
it was 10 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting on the couch. It was in the middle of COVID. My hair was everywhere, and they announced this award. And they're like, Daniel, do you want to come on and say a couple of words? And this is like my biggest nightmare at the time because contrary to what people probably think, like because I do a podcast, I don't really enjoy
Mm-hmm.
public speaking or being like, the
Yeah.
center of attention. Everybody's looking at me and
Mm-hmm.
having like 80 people all staring at me, expecting me to say something. I was like, what is going on? This is such a
Yeah.
bad like moment for me, but also like I'm happy. I don't know. It was a weird
And
experience.
you would have also, you probably just as valuable and probably more warm for you would have been like a note from a leader saying, hey, Daniel, I really appreciate that contribution you made. That's awesome. Here's the impact it had. That probably would have been more comfortable for you and rewarding. And a manager knowing that, you can make decisions
Yeah.
or knowing like what motivates people on your team, what are the motivating factors for them in terms of intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. That's what like really good managers have these dials that they turn up or down based on how well they know their team against like a common structure of expectations and all those things that we talked about. And that's really no different than when we go back to the influencing styles. Knowing what your influencing style is and what they are allows you then to think about how you might adapt yours from like a natural state to an applied state based on what is going to be influential with the person you're trying to influence, the stakeholder, the thing you're trying to get done. And I think that's a real difference between like what a director level person can do and what a VP can do. And we feel like as we try to move these teams from being this service provider function, cost center that recruiting or staffing used to be called, into this more trusted advisor subject matter expertise, the
Yeah.
ability to like understand influencing styles, your own and others, is a real key one.
That's the perfect segue into what I wanted to get into next. So back in 2022, we had Jackson Lynch on the show, and he shared his views on how the role of HR is viewed differently, company to company, board to
Mm-hmm.
board, CEO to CEO. And we talked about how important it is for HR to have a deep understanding of the business, the revenue model.
Mm-hmm.
He also talked about like, building a business case for the different programs that you want to have and how a lot of HR leaders struggle there. And he suggested that there, may be a talent shortage in terms of actually qualified HR leaders that are ready for the role of, CPO, CHRO, or
Mm-hmm.
even, like the head TA role. So just curious, like having placed a bunch of senior people in HR, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Like, what are you saying?
Yeah, we're seeing a huge shortage in that in these heads of people, CPO, and head of talent roles. And I think there's like two factors here. One is like some great CPOs are leaving the business, which is tough to see. So they may not be leaving the profession entirely, but they're leaving the in-house head of people role. The last 4 years have been extremely challenging for those leaders. They're tired, they're burnt out, and mentally it's hard to think that they have another one in them. So a lot of them are taking sabbaticals, taking leaves, starting their own thing, switching professions entirely, and that's tough. That's tough to watch. So that's one thing. The second, I think, is to his point and what you just mentioned is they are looking for a different skill set than has been traditionally sought after, and it's more around the characteristic of the person that I think they're looking for. I think today we're seeing the most forward looking and talent focused companies looking for business leaders with a passion, who have a passion for people versus people leaders with an interest in business, right? That's the shift that's happening. And that's two different skill sets. So business driven leader first, who is adept and can lead the people function, is different than someone who like, I'm a people person. If you've heard that before, people person, that's generally shorthand for like, I lead with heart over head. And I have a lot of anecdotes, but maybe I don't really understand how talent in our company can unlock and drive business based on what's unique about our company.
Yeah, and I know you've already mentioned some of these elements of like what makes being a trusted advisor, and I've read the blog post, but for people listening, what are some of the attributes or behaviors that you think make a talent leader, HR leader, a trusted advisor?
Yeah, so we mentioned influencing fast. I think the ability to influence is key, but I think also part of it is around using data to influence. And data for data's sake is not enough, but understanding how data and insights and the ability to do storytelling and influencing with data, I think is really key. I don't know that your average people leader is super comfortable with downloading a CSV, putting it into a pivot, and creating some like basic charts and graphs off of those. They generally have an analytics team. But like, what if you did that live in a executive team meeting where you're like, hey, let me download, let me show this. Hey, this is a pie chart of where our team falls on an engagement curve versus like, hey, let me go to our analytics team and get back to you. And then a week later, you show that, right? And so the ability to like be adept and comfortable and quickly influence with data, I think is really key. Part of that's like understanding what metrics really matter and things like that. We can dive into that. I think the second is that to be that trusted advisor, you're bringing insights from the market. So from your network of other CPOs at companies or other leaders to connections to market data and your own data and triangulate around that. So in general, the triangulation formula we love is your own historical data, which somehow a lot of companies forget about this one. Like they forget, like, what have you done historically? Like, is one. Second is like broader market data. And then what are our peers doing? So I think the best people leaders and talent leaders have a short cohort of people who are in their job at the normal logos that the exec team uses to benchmark, and they have relationships so they can go to them quickly. Hey, what are you all doing about return to work? What are you doing about what's your attrition looking like over the last 3 months? Versus waiting for the 6-month survey or the lagging indicators. They can quickly go get those insights. They also become like a quick subject matter expert and have command more respect in that room.
So are you seeing CEOs that are hiring for the CPO role? Are they vetting out like the network of the people that they're hiring?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, so they're like, hey, if I said, hey, could you go get me some quick data points from 5 competitor companies on this? Like, what would you do? What would the first thing you do? What would be the next thing you do? Like, they're really looking for that. And they're looking for more of the systems thinking behind it versus like the actual of it. Like, how would they break down that problem? How would they think about going about it? But yeah, they are looking at like depth of network being something that's really important.
It's really interesting listening to what you're sharing with us, Adam. I mentioned before the call, like I recently sold my other business. I'm starting to think about what the next move is for me. And to be honest, I haven't made it very far, but there's, at this point in my career, which is like 20 plus years in HR tech entrepreneurship now, there are a lot of things I could do. And I think I could, depending on the type of company and the size, I could add value in a variety of different ways. HR is one of those. And I've thought to myself, okay, if I had to choose between a sales role, a product role, and an HR role, what would be, how would I prioritize those? And almost every single time the HR role, an HR leader role is at the bottom of the list for me. And I don't know why. I really, I don't know why. And and I'm being totally honest here and a little vulnerable. It could be having heard the stories. We have these conversations every single week, sometimes multiple conversations a week. And then there's, the conversations before and after the podcast recording. And so I don't know if that kind of plays in to my mindset, Because
Mhm.
you could argue like, well, Steven, you have this experience and there's a dire need. Like, why wouldn't you flip your prioritization and look at people leader role first?
Yeah.
But again, like when I think about it, and I'm just being totally honest here,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always at the bottom of my list. And
Yeah.
I
I
I think I
understand
have
that.
some things to think about. But one question I have regarding the trusted advisor points that you just made is, of these skills, of these four kind of traits and
Yeah. Mhm.
qualities, are
Yeah.
they, which do you find is the hardest to complete the skill set?
Yeah. So just to summarize, they are, influences with data, like influences and with data, brings market insights, builds relationships, and creates shared accountability, which we didn't talk about number four a lot, but happy to go into that. I think it's number three. I think it's builds relationships. I think the other three are more learned skills that you can, but I think a little bit of the builds relationships is a little bit around characteristics, and is a little bit, softer, make me more, maybe harder for others than some. And so I think that one's the hardest and takes a longer time. I believe it's a longer arc to do. And so I feel like that would be like the one I'd say is probably the most challenging.
Interesting. Yeah. And that, I mean, as I'm hearing this, like for me, that's like one of the stronger, of the four. I would say that's,
Hmm.
one of the ones I do best.
Yeah.
And so maybe I need to reconsider my prioritization here.
Maybe we
But
spend some time. I have a whole like 2x2 framework we can go through for you and like helping you get clarity on like what you're looking for. But we think like running a structured job search is very similar to running a structured interview hiring approach if you were like the CEO, right?
huh,
Like there's so many corollaries. I can walk you through it on the side, but there's some really interesting ways of if you do this upfront work in a very objective, structured way, it actually becomes really clear on what you're looking for and easy to communicate to those who might be able to help you find that.
Since we
oh
don't,
my God. If you, yeah, I definitely want
well,
to
I was gonna
follow up with
say,
you on that.
well, I was gonna say we don't have much time. I don't think we're gonna be able to get into the other topics we had lined up. I want to hear more about this framework, if you don't mind. Just
All right, yeah. Okay, so think about think about if you were scoping a job effectively, you would think about what are the skills required, skills and experiences someone needs, right? Those are the observable things, the tangible things, and what are the characteristics of the person that I need? These are um, systems thinker, effective communicator, right? And so what we've seen over the arc of job searches and our experience is that think about the hiring is if think about the theorem, think about a geometry for a second. The theorem is like we want to make the best hire possible. The given is like the skills and experiences, but the proof is the characteristic. So what makes someone a good or great hire isn't the skills and experience. It's actually they like their core values, how they operate aligns to what success uniquely looks like in that company. And like that's the magic of recruiting is being able to like suss out someone's characteristics and map them to what matters most in that company. The skills and experiences are just like the screen. They're just like the in the door, right? So reverse that and think about a job search and think about like a 2x2, like a four quadrants here. On the left side is tangible, and on the right side is the intangible. And the two rows are must haves and nice to have. Okay, so you think about what are the tangible things that matter to you. They could be location, they could be size of company, they could be industry. These are all things that you can see from a distance and do quick research. It could be the role itself, it could be the scope of it. Hey, I want to be at the top job, I want to be a number two. And then you actually draw a line like what are the must-haves of those and what are the nice-to-haves, right? So you separate those. They're like, what am I flexible on and what is like what's a non-negotiable for me? And the only rule of thumb is you can't have more than five in the must-haves. So, and you ideally less, but no more than five. And then the intangibles are the culture of the company, who you might be working for, all the like think about the characteristics of a candidate. This is like the characteristics of the company, right? And so you can use the tangible ones to do sourcing to find the job, right? Like to like look at companies, do research, look at Crunchbase, whatever narrow list. And that can help you identify what companies you might want to talk to. And you're really only going to find the characteristics through meeting them and talking to them, just like a candidate, right? But having this 2x2 also allows you to clearly and crisply communicate, Daniel, I'm looking for a head of people or number 2 role at a high growth company that has a hybrid office model that is in this thing. He's like, you know who you should talk to? I don't know, but you should talk to this person. And we all know it's the person knows the person knows the person, but their ability to pass along that clear, crisp focus you have allows them to think of the right person. So now you have the companies you're talking to, and now you know what questions to be asking for or screening for, because you have these intangible things that really matter to you. And you run a structured process, right? So you ask the same questions of the same companies, and you start to be able to compare them side by side. Job seekers do is they start looking at job descriptions. They start searching for head of sales, head of people, and then they start to unconsciously mold their criteria to the job description. And this is where people make bad career decisions, where they kind of like sell themselves on something versus anything versus what they really want to do. And so this objective framework holds yourself accountable to what you said you wanted objectively before you start getting influenced by recruiters or job descriptions or flashy logos.
It's like you've gone in my head, Adam, and it's like you've peered into my biggest fear. My biggest fear, being open to work and like not even having announced this really on LinkedIn yet or changed my status is I'm going to pick a role and I'm going to find out that like that actually isn't what I wanted to do. Like, do I want to be a head of sales? Like, and what you're describing is like identifying the things that I know. What I love about this process is like I know some of the tangibles, like those things I do know. I don't know what job title I want. I don't know, because that could look different based on.
So that could be a nice to have, right? The title itself could be in your nice to have, right? So that helps you kind of create like some open up the aperture a bit. But I think if you start just, imagine if you're a hiring manager on the other side, if you start just talking to candidates and you know what you're looking for, you might actually start molding the criteria for the job around someone that you had a bias for, or you missed out on something you have a bias against. And so I think like running a structured on both sides of the house is a really healthy exercise.
Well, if you're serious, I want to take you up on that offer. I want to go through this process with you because it sounds amazing.
If I could do this all day, that's what I would do. It turns out it's not always like a business, but this is like the closest. running GBD is the closest approximation to doing a lot of that type of work. But I get excited about it. I love to talk about it.
Yeah, well, and I think this is needed. Like I have talked to so many other people over the last year. Well, really, more of the last 6 months, because with all the layoffs, there's a lot of people out there that are like, "Hey, can I just pick your brain?" And I know that I'm not alone. That there are other like experienced people out there that are struggling to figure out like, where do I go from here? Like this did not end the way that I thought it was going to end. Now, like I feel as though like I'm starting over from scratch here, and having a framework like this, takes the pressure off, right? Because you're using an objective process to evaluate like what is it that would, not that you want or that you need, but that may make sense for you based on the criteria that you lay out. So really interesting.
Yeah, and we all naturally want to help people, right? Like humans want to help humans, but the hardest person to help in their job search is when they're not sure what they're looking for, right? And so if you're able to communicate this to Daniel in a really clear framework way, here's what I'm looking for, that's easy for him to mentally go through his LinkedIn network or think about people and vice versa. And it pops up these people in their mind, because things that you say trigger people in their mind, and they can make this connection. People generally love to connect people with one another.
Wow. Well, I say this almost every episode. I don't know how we got here 50 minutes later, but I need to
do like a mashup of all the times you've said that. Compilation.
It would be quite the mashup, but we're here, and to Daniel's point, there were a lot of other topics that we wanted to touch on today, really meaty, exciting topics. So I hope you're enjoying this conversation, Adam, because we would love to have you back to dig into some of those.
Yeah,
but right now we need to turn the corner and head into what we call our rapid fire questions. And
Okay.
it's the same 3 questions that we ask every guest. We tweak them over time, and there's one that we have recently tweaked because we realized that that one of our questions wasn't fully resonating. So it's similar but slightly different. But I'm going to jump
Okay.
in. First question: how do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
Yeah, that'll be a bit of a summary of what we talked about. I think it's, 3 things I say. Business leader first, people leader second. I think they drive results while still being warm and empathetic. And I think they're a structured or systems thinker. So those would be like the 3 characteristics I would say.
Next question: if you could go back in time and talk to 22-year-old Adam, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
You're going to be bald one day. I don't know if that's career advice. That's just more of a, kind of back
Life.
to the future. Here's what's going to happen to you. Vegas is going to win the Stanley Cup in 2023. That would be good advice. Yeah, that would have been life changing for me. Um, I think probably the advice I would have would be don't overthink the next steps in your career. Don't be thinking like too many steps ahead in your career versus what's the next step for me? Is it the right step? And then, anything worth doing is worth doing well. Like do a great job at it. And so I think early on, I felt like I had to have this like career progression or career ladder. These are things. Career ladder used to be a phrase in the past. Like I feel like it's rarely used now. But we all had parents who maybe like had these long careers within companies or organizations, and I felt like, oh, I need to know this career progression. And I think sometimes that made me not take as many risks as I should have, or tried something that I could have if I didn't know that it was leading to the next thing.
It's hard to think that just a couple of generations ago, right, that how different things were for us. Like because
Mm-hmm.
I think we're in the same generation. I graduated from UT in the fall of 1999, and I joined the workforce in
Yeah,
2000. And man, things were just so
yeah,
different back then. I remember
so different.
talking about career ladders. So
Yeah, yeah.
next question: is there anything you believe to be true about the world of work,
Mm.
but don't yet have the data to support it?
Yeah, and there might be some data, but I don't know that I haven't seen a lot of it. I think there's like just the value of helping people in the long arc of relationships. Like, I don't know if it's true data wise, but I feel like leading with the intent of truly wanting to help others in their career is also good for yours. Um, I don't know that to be true. I feel that to be true, but I don't know that I've seen data that ties to that.
I agree with that. And there's no better feeling than helping somebody with their career. Like, just yesterday, I was having one of these conversations that you were describing. A past guest that we had on the show wanted to set up some time to catch up, and they are thinking about like what their next role looks like. And they sort of have like
Mhm.
they don't have a concrete idea of what that looks like, but they have some idea. And it just got me thinking. I was like writing down names like in a notepad, and I was like, I think these are the 10
Mhm.
people that you should try to work for. And I don't
Mhm.
know, like hopefully something comes of that. And I hadn't even
Yeah.
really thought about the possibility that that would benefit me in the future, but just doing that feels so good. Like there's nothing that feels better than
Yeah.
that.
Well, we all know a story about someone who maybe like took the wrong career path, right? Or took the wrong job. And think about how costly that is financially and emotionally to make the wrong decision, in a job, particularly early in your career. If you get on the wrong path and you have to like reverse course and change, and we've probably all been like in some micro version of that, that's really hard. So like the faster you can help people discover, or the better you can help them get into the right spot, it just unlocks them, not just professionally, but personally. It impacts their family, it impacts like so many things. And I think there's no bigger dividend that you can get than helping someone feel that they're the right place in their lives. And we spend so much time of our day working and a week working. If you can align those 2 things, you've really changed the slope for them emotionally, financially, career wise, all the things.
Yeah. And speaking of, I guess, referrals and recommendations, one thing we spend a lot of time on is trying to figure out like who do we need that bring onto the show next? Like who
Mm-hmm.
is, doing some amazing work that maybe nobody's hearing about, or testing something out that hasn't been done before. Like who should we bring onto the show next? Is there anybody that maybe either you know or maybe you've heard about some of the work they're doing,
Mhm.
and if you could, would get like 30 minutes of their time and just ask a bunch of questions? Like who are some of these people?
Yeah, and you've had so many people. Like, there's like few people left in the industry you all haven't like talked to. But I was thinking around this theme of people who have more like non-traditional backgrounds, who've like maybe started out on business and then come over to talent, or kind of have more of those characteristics we talked about. So two people. So one would be Leslie Crow at Bain Capital Ventures, and I think that's interesting because we do see a lot more people leaders and venture firms hiring more of these like CPO types. So it's a trend to pay attention to. Historically, venture firms were hiring a lot of just like individual recruiters to like fill some roles. We're seeing them move more strategic and upstream to like more CPO types. So she's like a good example of that. And I think she's a little bit of a glimpse into the future. And she's amazing. So I think that's one interesting. And the other person would be Carrie Van Voorhees. And she comes from like a heavy business background, and I think has a lot of characteristics I talked about in terms of people leader. She's now the CPO at checkout.com. Oscar Health started out at Bridgewater. So you can imagine she's like very first principles in her approach. And she's the best.
Well, we're gonna have to reach out to all of those recommendations.
Yeah.
Were you gonna jump in, Steven?
No. I just was like, I think those are all great. We would
Yeah.
be honored to have them all on the show, or any of them.
Yeah. All right. So on to the last tradition of the modern people leader, which is one word or phrase close. So we all respond with a word or phrase from the episode that we want to close with. Does anybody have anything yet? If not, I can go. And I'm going to say structure. I feel like that was one of the common threads throughout the conversation. And I think to your point that you think if you want to be a people leader, you need to be a people person, and you do need to be a people person, but you need to lead with business and structure. So that was probably the lasting impression that I had from this conversation.
I'll go
I can go
next.
next.
Oh,
go
ahead.
please. Go, Steve. No, go. Okay.
I insist.
I would say, I think intention would be my word. So like, whether it's being intentional about your job search or intentional about who you're looking to hire, whether you're a leader or a hiring manager or whatever, I think, leading with intention is a big one. So I'm going to say intention.
I'm going to go personal and say excited. It's not really a word or phrase from this conversation, but I, now looking to the future about what I have ahead, I have shifted. This conversation really has shifted my mindset from kind of anxious and fearful to excited. And I'm looking forward to our follow-up conversation.
I love that. Love that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Shout out to Shelby Wopa again for connecting us with you that night at the Transform conference. It's been a blast having you on. You absolutely did not disappoint. So thank you for joining us and having a really kind of open and candid conversation with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.